Am I stupid for letting my bestie and my boyfriend hang out together alone? Disclaimer, this is not my story time with me on Instagram. I have been told by everyone I know that I am the stupidest girlfriend alive. Now let me explain why. My boyfriend and I were in a situationship for about 4 years. Yeah, that's a really long time. And I was obsessed, so I never wanted to let go of it, even though he never wanted to have a serious relationship with me. He even went as far as telling me that he had 4 other situationships at the same time as me. But this didn't make me want to be with him any less. Finally, my entire family, my cousins, my moms, my sisters, and my brothers, they all managed to convince me that I needed to ask for something more serious or I needed to move on. So I did. So I went to him and I gave him an ultimatum. If you don't want to be with me, then we need to end things. And miraculously, he said, yes, I want to be in a relationship with you because I don't want to lose you. This was the happiest day of my life, which is so sad, right? And after that, he started showing up. He would come pick me up from work, take me out to dinner every single weekend. He would plan every single date. He would text me nonstop throughout the day. Well, it's been a year now and we're pretty happy. If anything, he's the one that's become very jealous because I get hit on a lot. But this is where my bestie comes in. Go to part 2. Am I stupid for letting my bestie and my boyfriend hang out together alone? Disclaimer, this is not my story time with me on Instagram. Finally, after begging him to be in a relationship with me, he committed. It was almost like he overcommitted. He was perfect in every single way finally, but then he became jealous. You see, I get hit on a lot, and because we started hanging out together more, he started seeing it, and this made him go crazy, which made him want me even more. And this is when he met my bestie. Now let me explain why they hang out alone together. They have so many things in common, things that him and I do not have in common. For example, they are both obsessed with video games. They also love drag racing. They both love riding motorcycles, and they're addicted to cartoons. I was so happy because they got along so well. My bestie is a little bit of a tomboy, so this is why it doesn't bother me. So they started hanging out at my place. We would play video games for about 6 hours, and then they would ride their motorcycles. But my mom, my friends, and my family think this is so wrong. They think my bestie is trying to steal my boyfriend away. I didn't think that was true. But then my boyfriend canceled the date with me because he wanted to play video games with my bestie. And I agreed. Go to part 3. Am I stupid for letting my bestie and my boyfriend hang out alone together? One day he's hanging out at his place with my bestie, and that's when he calls me to cancel a date. He explains that him and my bestie are on a roll and that they've been playing this video game all day and they don't want to stop. And I was like, okay, sure. But as soon as he hung up the phone, I started to cry. I called my mom and explained to her, and my mom told me that I needed to get rid of my bestie and that this was totally wrong of them to be hanging out alone. I decided to tell my bestie that I wasn't comfortable with this. I did not expect her to react this way, but she got angry at me. She told me her loyalty was to me and that I should trust her. Then I told my boyfriend separately, and then he got mad at me too. He said that I shouldn't be listening to my family and that he would never cheat on me, especially with my best friend. Even though I told him I wasn't comfortable with this, they still continue to hang out, but in my apartment. My family thinks something's going on, but I don't know what to believe. Are they overreacting or am I underreacting? What do you think I should do?
Story time about how I found out that my boyfriend was cheating on me with his homeboy. So a little background information. I was 18 and in my senior year of high school. I met my boyfriend Kevin in our junior year, and then we started dating our senior year of high school. We had a really good relationship and we would talk almost 24/7. We would text each other all throughout class. We would call each other every night, stay on the phone for hours. We would even skip classes together, and I thought that we were deeply in love. The only time that we wouldn't hang out was whenever his best friend needed him. Like, he would skip dates that we had planned and stuff like that. And I honestly just thought that he was being a good friend. But my best friend Taylor suspected that he might secretly be gay and cheating on me with his best friend. And I personally thought the only reason why she thought this was because his best friend was openly gay. But I didn't believe this because him and I were also intimate with each other. But then I started noticing some really weird stuff. Like the one day while we're sitting at lunch, Kevin and his best friend are sitting next to each other, and I see them holding hands under the table. I asked him about this. He said it was because his best friend had social anxiety. Fast forward, the one time we're all at this party and I saw them kiss. Like, part 2 about how I found out that my boyfriend was cheating on me with his homeboy. So like I said, the one time I see them holding hands under the table, and whenever I asked my boyfriend why he was doing that, he was like, oh, it's because my best friend has social anxiety. And I'm like, okay. And then fast forward, we're all at this party and I see them kissing. And when I confronted him about it, he was like, oh, like we just like to play pranks like that sometimes. And I believed him because I really didn't think that my boyfriend was cheating on me with his homeboy. So fast forward to his birthday. I wanted to surprise him, so I went to his house, and to my shock, I see Kevin hooking up with his best friend. And when I confronted him about it, he was like, no, like, I swear I'm straight, da 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 da. I'm like, bro, why are you lying to me? Like, there's no reason to lie anymore. I caught you. So at that point, I literally just left his house and I blocked him, and I even begged my parents to let me move schools because I was so embarrassed. And from now on, I learned to not trust guys who are too close to their friends. Like, any guy who chooses their friend over me now is sus.
I caught my husband slipping me birth control after 6 months of trying to get pregnant. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Huzzy and I have been married for 3 years. As newlyweds, we made the decision to not have kids early on. We wanted to enjoy each other, travel, and really focus on our careers. And thankfully, we've been able to do that. We both have great jobs. We live in a wonderful city, and we were even able to buy our own apartment in one of the best high-rises where we live. We even take care of our families. The point is, our lives are pretty good. About 8 months ago, I brought up the conversation because I thought that it was time. Finally, after 2 months, we decided that we would just start trying. And then ensued 6 months of me trying to get pregnant. But I've struggled so much. I keep track of my temperature, my cycles. I am so on top of everything. I know exactly when we need to do it. And we had been. At times, we would both get off of work and meet each other somewhere random and just do it. Just because it was the perfect time. But nothing was working. Finally, after 6 months, I thought, you know what? I should go to the doctor. And when I told my husband this, he freaked out. He yelled at me, number one, which he never does. And he forbade me from going to the doctor. Number two, I caught my husband slipping me birth control after 6 months of trying to get pregnant. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sent me on Instagram. After he forbade me from going to the doctor, I asked him why. After all, we'd been trying for so long to get pregnant and nothing was working. That's when he said that it was probably just the stress and that all I needed to do was calm down. And you know what I did? I believed him. I didn't go to the doctor. But then he started acting really suspicious. Anytime that I would go into the kitchen, he would just try to rush whatever he was doing. And he even started insisting that he would wash the dishes and do all the cooking. He said that this was probably going to help me out with my stress. But in reality, cooking and cleaning is something I actually love. This included making me my daily smoothie. You see, I would always prep my smoothies in the freezer. I would just pop out a bag and put it in the blender. So one night I wake up and it's 3 a.m. and he's making some noise in the kitchen. When I walk out into the kitchen, as soon as he sees me, he drops something onto the floor. I run over to pick it up and guess what it is? It's birth control. And he was putting it in my smoothie prep. That's when he lied and said they were anxiety pills. Go to part 3. I caught my husband slipping me birth control because he was cheating on me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sent me on Instagram. When I saw the pills on the floor that he dropped, I grabbed them and knew exactly what they were. This man decides to gaslight me and say that they're anxiety pills, when literally the label says birth control. And then very calmly, I asked him to just explain to me why he was giving me birth control. But again, he denied it. So I grabbed a knife and started stabbing the TV. It's his favorite thing in the world. And when I was about to stab his laptop, he finally broke down and told me. That's when he confesses that he's in love with someone else and that he's been seeing her for a year. And that he just didn't have the heart to tell me that he didn't want to have kids with me because he's in love with her. Grabbed his phone and asked him to call her. And he did. And when she answers the phone, I ask her if he knows that he's married and she said no. And she broke up with him right then and there. That's when he started begging me for forgiveness, but I kicked him out anyway. I called the cops and they said that I can't do anything about this. I did file for divorce and I left the apartment. His mistress told me that he's still begging to get back with her, but she won't. Her and I actually met up for coffee and we're friends now. So good riddance to him.
Storytime about how my stepdad made my mom choose between him and my brothers. So a little background information, I was 13 years old and in 7th grade, and I had 2 older brothers, Josh and Alex, who were twins, and they were both 4 years older than me. Whenever I was 3, my dad left my mom for his dentist, and we never saw him again because he decided to start a whole new family with them. Now, because of that, my older brothers always felt like they had a specific role in my family, especially because the guys that my mom brought home, they would only last a week. Well, finally, my mom met this guy who's really nice, and she decided that she was going to get married to him, but he despised my older brothers. Mainly because before he moved in with us, my mom would not depend on him for anything. Anything that needed taken care of around the house, my brothers would do it. And we didn't have too much money while this guy was loaded. Like the one time my mom and this guy, who we're going to call Jerry, got into a fight. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my stepdad made my mom choose between him or my brothers. So like I said, my mom and Jerry got into this one fight, and it's a super long story, but pretty much all it made Jerry realize was that he did not have authority over my mother, and she didn't have to depend on him for anything because my brothers would always be there for her. Now, Alex was more of the shy one. Meanwhile, Josh was super hot-headed and didn't deal with anybody's bullshit. And fast forward, my mom and Jerry move in together. That's when we realized that Jerry was super abusive. And Jerry knew that he could pick on Alex whenever he wanted because he wasn't going to do shit. And most of the time, Josh wasn't home because he literally hated Jerry. The one time Alex came home and he did really bad on this one test. And Jerry was like, oh, he needs to learn discipline, blah, blah, blah. The next day, we all were sitting down for breakfast and we saw Alex come downstairs with a black eye. And that's whenever Josh flipped the fuck out. He grabbed Jerry, ripped him across the fucking table, and threatened him with a kitchen knife. And my mom called the cops, like for part 3. Part 3 about how my stepdad made my mom choose between him or my brothers. So like I said he needed to teach some discipline, so he literally beat the shit out of Alex. And we all didn't know until he came downstairs the one morning for breakfast. And that's whenever Josh flipped the hell out. He threatened Jerry with a knife. After that, my mom called the cops. I didn't really do anything but try to de-escalate the situation. But after that, Jerry called a family meeting down to the kitchen table. And he was like, I will not deal with this level of disrespect in this house. He was like, you need to choose between me or them. She was like, well, I'm not going to choose between you or my kids. And he was like, well, then you need to choose them leaving the house. They're about to be 18. They can leave and get their own place. So my mom ended up choosing Jerry because Jerry had a lot of money. And my brothers weren't really that mad about it because it got them out of the house. And my mom would send them a lot of money every month. And Jerry never knew about it. But now instead of him being abusive towards my brothers, he's way more abusive towards my mom.
Story time about how my mom found out my dad had a whole other family, and then he abandoned her with 5 kids. Yes, this is my mama's story time. I'm gonna try not to cry. My mama and specimen donor met when they were super young. They got married when she was 21 and she got pregnant at 22. And then they had 4 more children. My brother and I are twins and we're the babies of the family. Now, when my brother and I were a year old, my mom started noticing some wacky stuff. Specimen donor was out all hours of the night because he had business here and there. And by the way, my mom is raising 5 children, including 2 newborn twins. Thankfully, she had the help of my sister. At the time, she was already 15, so there's a huge age gap between her and I. Oh my god, I'm already losing it. Shout out to my amazing sister because she helped raise me and my siblings. In fact, when I wanted to go out to a party or something, my mom would tell me to go ask my sister for permission because she always said no to everything. So one day my mom confronts specimen donor. This is when he confesses that he had gotten someone else pregnant. Not only was she pregnant, she'd already had another kid of his, and that he was gonna go live with his new family. My mama kicked him right out. She enrolled herself in night school and became a lawyer. She took over my grandpa's dying law office, and she is now one of the most recognized lawyers in all of Central America. Thank you, closest, for working with me on this video. I seriously love you guys. And to all the mamas out there working hard, you are seen and you are loved. Bye.
Story time about the girl who used me to get with my guy best friend. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 9th grade. Well, at the end of summer, right before school started, this girl named Liv added me on Snapchat. And I had seen her all around school. She was very popular and a little bit stuck up. But I added her back and then I got a call on Snapchat from her. I answer very awkwardly and I'm like, hi. And then she was like, oh, I've seen you in a lot of this guy's pictures. Are you guys like best friends? And I'm like, yeah, sort of. And she goes, have you ever thought about dating him? It was just an extremely weird out of nowhere conversation. Anyway, so fast forward 2 weeks, I walk in the first day of school with my best friend Tommy. And Tommy and I have like every single class together. For some reason, Liv thought that we were friends and she would come and go as she pleased. Like Tommy and I would be standing at my locker. She would come over. Anyways, fast forward to chemistry. She walks in the class, winks at Tommy, like for part 2.
My husband forced me to watch him doing it with another woman. Disclaimer is not my story time, send me on Instagram. I'm an overweight 28-year-old. My husband hates the fact that I'm fat. He and I dated for 2 years before he asked me to marry him. At this time, everything was pretty much okay. We had a lot of fun together. We were basically best friends. But after we got married, I ended up gaining some weight. Mostly because I wasn't really taking care of myself and because I've never cared about gaining weight or not. But to my husband, this is horrible. After I gained 20 pounds, he started saying things like, you're starting to look different and I don't like it. I can see your belly when we're having sex. And I gained another 20 pounds. And this is when he was really grossed out. If I asked him for a towel while I was showering, he would just throw it at me. Because apparently the sight of my naked body disgusted him. After a few weeks, I asked him to stop talking to me that way and he said that he wouldn't because he didn't marry a fat woman. But I think he should love me no matter what. Even if I'm fat or skinny, he should still love me. He got to the point where he wouldn't even touch me or kiss me good morning or good night. And we used to have a pretty active sex life. Things got way worse. He started not coming home. Part 2 is up. My husband was so disgusted by my body that he couldn't stand the sight of me naked. This is when he stopped coming home some nights. The next day that he would finally arrive, he was always drunk and extra mean. I would ask him where he went and he would say I was at the bar with my friends. And by friends, he meant his coworkers. And by coworkers, he meant his work wife. At this point, I had to take my makeup off, you guys, because it was way too cakey. Even my brother said it looked bad. I knew about my husband's work wife because at every work event, she was always there and she was always trying to be so nice to me. He would say things to me like, oh, he better be treating you right. You're so beautiful. But the whole time I know my husband's more attracted to her than me. This woman was really fit too. She loved the gym and my husband and her had that in common. This is when I started becoming more and more jealous. Every time he stayed out with his friends, I would ask him where he went. Finally, he confessed one night that he had been hooking up with his coworker and that it served me right. He told me my body was so grotesque that he gagged every time he saw me naked. Yeah, my own husband is telling me that. But instead of reacting like a normal person and leaving him, I decided to get even fatter. He ended up gaining another 15 pounds. And this pissed him off even more. It made me happy to piss him off. Part 3 is up. My husband forced me to watch him do it with another woman. Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. This is when I gained another 10 pounds just to piss him off. In retaliation, he started kicking me out of our bedroom at night. If I would get into bed, he would literally kick me off the bed. That's when he told me that I needed to go downstairs and work out, or at the very least, stop eating. At this point, I knew that he had been having an affair with his work wife. So I decided to ask him directly. He had no shame in telling me that he was having an affair with her. That's when he started saying things like, her body is way better than yours. He even said that he was more than happy to bring her over so that I could meet her. And that's what he did the very next day. He brought her to our house. I expected her to be on my side and tell him absolutely no. Instead, she started calling me names as soon as she came into our house. She started referring to me as the fatty. Suddenly, they started getting naked. And I just watched. Part of me couldn't believe it. I was frozen in time. While they were getting it on the couch, I was sitting there crying. The whole time my husband is calling me a pig. When they were done, they left. 2 days later, he asked me for a divorce. But I don't want to give it to him. He'll have to die married to me. What should I do?
Okay, part 2. So like I said, I look in the mirror and I see myself smiling back at me. And that's whenever everything went south so quick. I sat on the bed, tried to pull myself together because I didn't want to make a fucking scene in front of everybody. But then I got caught in this fucking loop. And if you don't know what the loop is, then I'm going to tell you what it is. It's basically where you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then I started looking around at everybody and it looked like their faces were melting. One of my friends got up off his chair, walked to the other side of the room, and I watched him do that. But when I looked back over at the fucking chair, he was still sitting there. So I looked at my one friend that was sober, who I was actually really close with, and I think he saw the look in my eye and he was like, "Do you want to leave now?" And I just shook my head, yeah, like I could not deal with that shit anymore. So we go to his car and then we drive to my boyfriend's house. Because I could not go home. I would have got crucified. Well, we get in the house and as soon as his mom sees me, she knows that something's wrong. Like for part 3.
Okay, part 3. So like I said, I walked in and she knew that something was wrong with me right away. Because she was like, "Oh, I have a letter from your boyfriend." And usually I would run up, grab it, read it really quickly, because I would only get like 1 letter a week. But instead I ran downstairs because her face was fucking melting. So 5 minutes later, she has to come downstairs and help me get dressed into my pajamas because I forgot how to dress myself. I didn't want to be left alone that night, so my friend stayed in the basement with me. So he went and tried to go to sleep, but he couldn't because I was watching Butterfly Effect for 8 hours straight. Like that was the only thing that could calm me down. But I still don't even know all the freaking words to it, which is weird. Like he would try to change the video and somehow I end up back to Butterfly Effect. And then he tried to kiss me. So he left the next morning because he had to go to work, which was at like 11 a.m. And I took this tab at 8 p.m. the day before. So I was getting texts like, "Where are you? You're supposed to be home now." So I had to go home and act normal in front of everybody while I'm still tripping balls. And I also got grounded for coming home late because I could not come home at the right time because I was tripping so hard. And this lasted for about 24 hours.
My father-in-law is forcing my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup today. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. Now, we did get married very, very young. By very young, I mean I was 18 and he was 19. When we started dating in high school, his dad was totally against the relationship. See, my husband was super popular. He played on the football team. All the girls chased him. He also played basketball and was perfect at everything he did. As you can imagine, was extremely strict with him. He was not even allowed to go out on weekends. Me, on the other hand, my parents are pretty much hippies. They let me do whatever I want. We're all very spiritual. My parents have full trust in me. Because of this, I make smart decisions. I actively seek my parents' advice. I even told my parents I lost my virginity when I did. And we had a big conversation about it. It was not dramatic. It was not like, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that." They just support me in everything I do. Now, my husband's parents are not the same. They tell him not to do a lot of things. They try to control him. So as we were dating in high school, his dad kept telling him to break up with me. He claimed that I was holding him back and that because of me, he spent less time training. Which technically, yes, is true. But at the same time, you cannot stop your son from experiencing human relationships. In fact, he actually broke up with me for 2 weeks. But then we got back together in secret. Everything culminated when he asked me to marry him right after graduation. His parents were absolutely against it. But my parents were all for it. You guessed it, go to part 2. My father-in-law wants my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup. When he asked me to marry him right out of high school, his parents absolutely freaked. They went to my parents' house and told me off for saying yes. In other words, they were completely blaming me for the whole thing. As if their own son didn't go buy a ring and ask me to marry him. Even did a beautiful proposal, which he had been planning for months. But at this point, his parents didn't even know that we were boyfriend and girlfriend. When they came to my house, his mom, my now mother-in-law, started crying and yelling at me. She told me that I was ruining their family, that I was trying to steal her son, and that all I really cared about was their money. By the way, my parents were middle class, but we were not destitute. His parents are very rich. They own several businesses. But of course, I'm not after their money. That's when they said that if we did end up getting married, I would have to sign a prenup. Duh, I said, yeah, I want to marry him because I'm in love. At this point, his parents knew they couldn't stop us. We were going to get married with or without their approval. But thankfully, his parents came around and let us get married. We had a quaint, small wedding. It was so magical. But his parents wanted him to go to college to play football. In other words, they wanted him to be the next Tom Brady. They made him train for hours, and they didn't even let us live together for the first year we were married. And because they were supporting him, he couldn't say no. They had us on a schedule. Could only see him for about 2 to 3 hours a day. And we were married. 2 years later, he's playing for a football team. But his parents keep thinking that I'm dragging him down. So now they're trying to convince him to leave me. Go to part 3. My father-in-law is trying to convince my husband to divorce me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and this is the final part of the 3-part story time, doing a full face of pink makeup. After a year of us being married, his parents did not allow us to live together because he needed to focus on football. So obviously, I was living with my parents. I was focusing on my own studies, but his parents did allow us to see each other 2 to 3 hours a day. Now, you might think my husband is a total pushover, but let me explain something. His parents paid for all of his training and his entire college tuition. They gave him the best of everything. He got sports massages every single day. They even installed a cold plunge in their backyard. They also had a full gym setup where he and his teammates would go work out every single day. In their house. Obviously, he did not have time for little old me. After a year of this, I couldn't take anymore. I wanted to be with my husband. So I gave him an ultimatum. That he tell his parents that he and I wanted to live together. That's all I wanted. I was even willing to pay for half of the rent. And he told his parents, they said fine. And they bought us a house. Obviously under my husband's name, not mine. Fast forward another year up until now. I've heard his dad tell him on several occasions that he needs to divorce me. That he could find a much prettier wife once he becomes bigger in the NFL. And I walked in on his mom telling him that maybe I can't even have kids. And that he should have me checked. My parents-in-law hate me. I sometimes feel like I am holding him back. They make us miserable. My parents think I should just walk away from the marriage, but I'm too in love. Should I confront my parents-in-law? Help me think of what I should say to them.
Story time about why my best friend cut me off. So a little background information, I was 24 and I had a full-time job as a nurse, and I had been best friends with this girl since we were in 7th grade. As soon as she turned 21, she got married, had a kid, and just like any young tragic love story, her boyfriend, who was way older than her, left her for some girl who just turned 18. So I ended up letting her move in with me. She had too much pride to go back to her mom's house. I ended up kicking her out of my house though, because she would have random guys over 24/7, and she would smoke you know what in my house. So I had the cops called on me 24/7 because my neighbors could smell it. So fast forward to now, she's living with her mom. Her and I got over that fight, and she decided that she wanted to go to college. I was so proud of her, but she asked me if I could watch her kid when she had to go into school because she was doing mostly online. So of course I said yes, I wanted her to succeed. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why my best friend cut me off. So like I said, she finally decided to go to college. Me being super happy for her, I would watch her kid whenever she would have to go into school. Well, the one night I'm making dinner and her kid's in the living room, I'm in the kitchen, and I go into the living room to tell him that dinner is ready. And I see my dog backed up into a corner and him with a fire poker, literally poking my dog. I wouldn't even call it poking, he was pretty much trying to stab my dog. My dog has its ears back, it's shaking with anxiety. So I go over and I rip it out of his hands and I smack his fingers. And I tell him, we do not do that to the dog. Like, what is wrong with you? So my friend comes, picks him up. A few days later, she comes to drop him off again. And she says, hey, can I talk to you? I already knew what it was about, so I was expecting this. She was like, Gavin told me that you hit him last time he was here. And I was like, yeah, he pretty much was stabbing my dog. And then she's like, oh, well, you know, he doesn't mean any harm. He plays with the dogs like that at home. Like, okay, sis, this
Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, wow, you're growing into your body, or wow, you got great hips. He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, Ew. He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, oh, you know how he is. So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dress so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. That's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. I finally told my dad and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting. And that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13 and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle.
Story time. My boyfriend cheated on me with the girl best friend. So a little background information. I was 17 and a junior in high school, and my boyfriend and I had been dating for a year. But just a little backstory about when we got together. So there were definitely some red flags that I missed, okay? One of them being that he had a girl best friend. And I don't care what y'all have to say if that makes me insecure or what, but coming from someone who has been the girl best friend, I knew this was not good at all. Especially whenever we first started dating and she was still being super friendly with him, meaning she would hold his hand, she would hang on him 24/7. And when I told him I was super uncomfortable with that and I felt like there needed to be some boundaries, he was like, yeah, I told you what it was whenever we got together. So if you don't like that, then just break up with me. Looking back on it now, that was also a red flag because I feel like he was telling me to break up with him so that way he didn't have to break up with me, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend cheated on me with the girl best friend. So like I said, she would still hang all over him and he pretty much told me, if you don't like that, then you can leave. Obviously, I did not want to leave because I liked him and he was my boyfriend. So I just kept putting up with it and eventually, we got 6 months into our relationship. So at that point, I'm thinking maybe I have a little bit more authority, to be like, hey, I don't like the way that she acts around you. You guys can't hang out like that anymore. And they would hang out alone together. He would take her to dinner. I literally tried telling him that the stuff that they do together is relationship stuff. And he was like, that's not true at all because we did all of this stuff before you and I even got together. So anyways, like I said, 6 months in, I'm like, hey, I don't like the way that you guys are hanging around each other. Once again, he gives me the same excuse. So he pretty much said that he didn't care. And the one night him and I were supposed to hang out, but he canceled on me last minute. And her and I didn't get along and she never Snapchatted me before, but then I get a Snapchat of her and him making out at his house.
My husband signed up for my sister's OnlyFriends. Should I divorce him? Disclaimer, not my story time, it's me on Instagram. My husband and I have a really toxic relationship. When he and I first started dating, I was extremely jealous. I would instigate fights almost every single day. Now that we're married, I'm definitely less jealous. But he's always been jealous throughout our relationship. He tries to control everything I do, down to the way I dress and even the people I can or cannot hang out with. He even insisted that I quit my job, which I did. He's invested a lot in Tesla and crypto, so he makes a lot of money without having to leave the house. Which, yes, is totally amazing. cheating, but that means he and I are together all the time. And with his jealousy, sometimes I just can't stand him. I've tried to help him with his jealousy because I used to be in that place. And when I try to talk to him about it, he just gets mad at me. Whenever he sees that I post something on Instagram, he gets angry. He says that I'm looking for attention, which of course I am, but not from guys. Everyone posts on social media because they want to show off their life. A little on my sister. We're identical twins, and we're really, really close. Unfortunately, my sister got laid off from her job last year. That's when she decided to start her OnlyFriends. I support her in everything she wants to do. She's actually making really good money from it, so she's really happy about it. A few days ago, I got on my husband's phone to look for something. When I see my sister's pictures, part 2 is up. My husband signed up for my sister's OnlyFriends. Should I divorce him? Disclaimers is not my story time. It's on Instagram. A few days ago, I got on my husband's phone to transfer some money from his account to mine. When I started looking for his banking app, I noticed something else on his screen. I had never seen this before, so I clicked on it. And as soon as I opened it, I see my sister's pictures. And I knew it was her OnlyFriends right away. By the way, I had never told my husband that my sister had an OnlyFriends. She wouldn't even post about it on her social media. So the fact that he found it makes me believe that he had my phone bugged or something. But here's the thing. He was using a different name for his account. So it was likely that my sister did not know it was him. From there, I could see that he was following a bunch of other girls. And when I went to their messages, he had paid over hundreds of dollars every single day to all of these girls. Can you imagine how much money that is? My husband came into the room and saw me on his phone. Of course, he didn't freak out because he never thought that I would find it. But I confronted him right away. But he didn't even flinch. He said he had every right to go on OnlyFans because it was the same thing as going to any website. I told him to at least unfollow my sister, and he said that he wouldn't. He said he loved it because it was like watching me do naughty things. Then he said, "Isn't this better than cheating on you?" I was flabbergasted. Part 3 is up. My husband signed up for my sister's OnlyFriends. Should I divorce him? Disclaimers is not my story time. It's on Instagram. That's when he told me that it was better than him cheating on me. And I was shocked. I couldn't think of anything else to say, so I threatened him. I told him that if he didn't stop following my sister, that I would start my own OnlyFriends account. Like I said, he's really jealous. So he went berserk. He ripped my phone out of my hand and threw it against the wall. Then he told me that the only reason he asked me to quit my job was so that I wouldn't be around other men. By the way, I used to be a personal trainer, and most of the time I would only train women. I told him that my sister and I wouldn't be comfortable with him looking at our OnlyFriends. It was so disturbing. Oh, and I also told him that he needed to stop controlling me, and that I could buy my own phone with my own money and start my own account. Then he came to his senses and started to apologize. And I also told him that I was suspecting that he bugged my phone and that he was receiving my messages because there was no other way he could have found out about my sister's account. Then he calmed down and explained things to me. He said that he had bugged my phone a few months ago because I was posting too much on Instagram and it was bothering him. So basically, he has access to my DMs and all my text messages. Promised to stop doing that and that he would buy me a new phone. And that's how he found out about my sister's OnlyFriends. He said he only signed up out of curiosity and that he only wanted to see a few pictures and then delete it. But the more he kept looking at her pictures, the more he would think of me and that it turned him on. And in front of me, he deactivated his account and deleted everything. He promised me that he would never do that again. Of course, I haven't forgiven him though. Haven't even spoken to him in days. But every time he sees me, he tries to kiss me and hug me. And when I push him away, he tries even harder. Honestly, I think he likes it. I do believe that he's secretly addicted to drama and that he thrives on it. I'm planning on never telling my sister about it. I don't think she'd feel comfortable around him ever again. I mean, I don't feel comfortable around him right now. I'm so confused and I don't know if I should leave him or not. He's so controlling all the time. What should I do?